Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Malaria. You know it's a global health crisis, right?
Right, yeah.
We all know current vaccines just aren't good enough. But get this. There's this potential breakthrough, and it uses a whole weakened parasite to trigger a stronger response from your immune system, a longer-lasting one, too. That's what we're going to dive into today. We've got a news article from MedicalXpress and a research article straight from PLOS ONE.
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. This isn't your typical vaccine. It's like they're trying to stop the parasite before it can even do any damage.
So, okay, let's break this down a little bit. I mean, we know malaria is spread through mosquito bites, but then what? What happens in the body?
Well, the parasite is actually pretty sneaky. It gets into your bloodstream, but it doesn't just immediately cause problems. Instead, it goes to the liver first. It's kind of like a home base where it can multiply, before it really launches that full attack.
Ah, I see. So this research targets that liver stage, right?
Exactly. One of the lead researchers, Volker Häusler, he said it best when he described it as, "The infection of the liver cells is a bottleneck where we can arrest and eliminate the parasites."
Interesting. So how are they actually stopping the parasite in the liver?
They're using this technique called gene knockout. So basically, they're trying to figure out which genes the parasite needs to develop in the liver, and then, they knock those genes out.
So it's like they're disarming a bomb, carefully taking out the parts that make it explode.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And to do this, they're using a rodent malaria parasite called Plasmodium burgii. It lets them do these controlled experiments before they try it with the human parasite.
So they're starting with mice.
Yeah.
Got it. But how do they even find those genes that are so important?
Well, they screened a huge library, like 1,500 parasite variants, and each one has a different gene knocked out. It's like this massive puzzle, and they're trying to find the missing piece that just stops the parasite in its tracks.
Wow, 1,500. That's a lot of searching. Did they find anything good?
They did. There's this gene called PbHscB, and it turns out it's super important for the parasite to grow in the liver. Without it, the parasite can't do what it needs to do to survive.
So if you knock out PbHscB, no more thriving parasite, that makes sense. But is it really that straightforward? I feel like there's got to be more to it. I mean, there's got to be some roadblocks, right? What if knocking out just one gene isn't enough?
You're on the right track. It's definitely a concern. The parasite could always find a way to get around just one knockout.
So what then? Do they just knock out more genes until something works?
That's one way to do it, and that actually led to a pretty exciting development. They combined the PbHscB knockout with another knockout of a gene called PlasMei2.
Wait, PlasMei2. Didn't we talk about that one earlier?
Yeah, we did. A single knockout of that one had already shown some promise in another study. But when you combine it with PbHscB, it's like you're putting a double lock on the door, Makes it way harder for the parasite to escape.
A 1-2 punch. But why is that PlasMei2 gene so important? Like, what does it actually do?
Well, it's crucial for the parasite to finish developing in the liver. If it doesn't have PlasMei2, it gets stuck. It can't move on to the bloodstream and cause malaria.
So it's like taking the wheels off the car. The engine might still run, but it's not going anywhere.
Perfect analogy. And the results from this double knockout are pretty amazing. When they tested it in mice, it gave them complete protection against malaria, even when they were exposed to a ton of the parasite.
Wow, complete protection. That's incredible. So does that mean we're close to a malaria vaccine that actually works?
We're getting there. This is definitely a huge step in the right direction. But we have to remember that what works in mice doesn't always work in humans. It's complicated. There's still a lot more research that needs to be done.
Yeah, I get it. So what are the next steps? What has to happen before they can test this in humans?
Well, the biggest thing is safety, of course. They have to be absolutely sure that this double knockout is totally safe for people. That means lots of testing to make sure it can't cause any harm.
That makes sense. But what kind of tests?
Well, they have to look at side effects, for one. And then there's always a chance that the parasite could revert back to the disease-causing form. And they need to make sure the vaccine would be effective for different groups of people. It's a long process, for sure.
And what if it all works out? Like, when could we see this vaccine actually being used to protect people?
It's hard to say for sure, but if the research keeps going well, we could maybe see clinical trials in humans in a few years.
That would be incredible. Okay, let's say for a second that this all works out perfectly. The double knockout is safe. It's effective. What would that mean for the world?
Oh, that would be huge. I mean, imagine a world without malaria, a disease that has been around for centuries. It would be amazing, wouldn't it?
It's hard to even imagine. We're talking about millions of lives saved.
Hmm.
And think about how many communities could be lifted out of poverty.
Exactly. It's not just about the big picture, though. Think about all the families that wouldn't have to worry about losing someone to malaria.
Yeah, it would give people the chance to live healthy lives without the constant fear of this disease hanging over them.
And think about all the kids. They could grow up, go to school, reach their full potential. It would change everything for them.
It really is inspiring to think
Yeah.
about the possibilities. But, all this talk about the science and the impact, I'm curious about something else.
What's that?
What about the ethical side of things? I mean, genetically modifying a parasite to make a vaccine. That sounds like sci-fi.
You're right to ask that. It's something that all the researchers are thinking about very carefully. Anytime you're messing with genes, you have to think about the ethics.
So what are people worried about with this kind of vaccine?
Well, some people are worried about what could happen if we release these genetically modified organisms, into the environment. Like, what if they evolve in ways we don't expect? Or what if they affect other species?
That's a good point. Are there rules about that?
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of very strict regulations about developing and testing genetically modified organisms. Researchers have to do really careful risk assessments and keep a close eye on how these organisms behave.
So it's not like they just release them into the wild and hope for the best.
No, no, no. It's a really controlled process.
Okay. That makes me feel better. But I bet some people just don't like the idea of changing nature like that.
Yeah, that's true. Some people think we shouldn't mess with the natural order of things, even if it's for a good cause. They say we should focus on other ways to fight malaria, like mosquito control or bed nets.
And those are important tools for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't been enough to get rid of malaria completely.
Right. And for a lot of people who live in places where malaria is a big problem, a vaccine would be a lifesaver. It would
Yeah.
protect them in a way that nothing else can.
So it's a tough issue. There are good arguments on both sides.
Yeah, there's no easy answer. It's important to talk about these ethical questions as the research moves forward.
It really is a lot to think about, not just the science, but the ethics too. What's the thing that stands out to you most about this research, though?
I think it's got to be the potential impact. Can you imagine a world without malaria? I mean, after centuries. It's incredible and kind of humbling at the same time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's just hard to really grasp how much suffering malaria causes. But then you see research like this and it's like, wow, maybe there's hope for a future where it's all gone.
And think about it. It's not just about getting rid of malaria. All the money and resources that go into fighting it now could be used for other things. Education infrastructure, even economic development.
It's like this ripple effect,
Yeah.
changing things for the better all over the world.
Exactly. But we have to be realistic too. It's a long road to actually getting rid of malaria. We're still in the early stages.
Right. There are definitely still a lot of challenges ahead.
Definitely. But even if this exact approach doesn't work out, I think the things they're learning will help us make more breakthroughs in the future.
That's what's so cool about science, right?
All right.
It's always moving forward, learning new things, building on what we already know to make things better.
And maybe someday, malaria will just be a bad memory. I mean, just imagine that for a second. What would a world without malaria look like to you?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it would mean that every kid has a chance to live a healthy life, to really grow up and become whoever they want to be.
It would mean families wouldn't have to worry about losing someone they love to a disease that we can prevent.
It would mean that whole communities could finally break free from poverty and sickness,
Mm.
all because of malaria.
It really would change everything.
Well, we're about out of time for this deep dive, but I want to leave everyone with this thought. The fight against malaria isn't over yet, but we're getting closer. With more research and new ideas, we can make a malaria-free world a reality.
It's definitely a future worth fighting for.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To-Do Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.